But tanks are outdated because of drones. God, you gotta love a title like this. And I respect Lazerpig so much for doing it. Love the dude. Like, I just do. I think he's fucking hilarious. Either way, make sure you guys check out the original. He had to re-upload it because of some copyright issues. So make sure you guys go and send him some love. Let's jump in.
Hello, I'm Lazerpig. Recently,
Hi,
my
Lazerpig.
inbox has been inundated with links to this article. Britain's Challenger 3 might already be outdated. This is brought to us by
great.
Military Watch magazine, an opinion blog with questionable origins masquerading as a news source that once proudly stated that Ukraine had lost 27 of its donated M1A1 Abrams tanks at the Battle of Avdiivka and surrounding areas back in 2023, based entirely on Russian propaganda numbers. It is now almost
think I
2026,
vaguely
and the
remember
number
that.
of lost M1 Abrams tanks confirmed at the time of recording stands at 22, 3 of which have been returned to service. The article is a
Yeah,
watered
that's
down
dope.
version of an opinion piece released by the UK Defence Journal, stripped of nuance, with references added in about how Russian and Chinese tanks were just, oh, so much better designed, and then given a
Oh,
snappy
no.
clickbait title. The objective
It's one of those fucking news sites. Gross. I hate those kinds of news sites. Oh, great. You're a better man than me, Laser.
here should be obvious to anyone, but propaganda works because you want it to be true. And remember, only boomers read the headlines and believe them, not you, because obviously you're a smart boy and you read the article, didn't you? Today
No,
want
I
to
just
address
assume
the
everyone's
original
always lying.
article in the UK Defence Journal, which, though posted by its chief founder and editor, George Allison, is actually the work of one Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, the chief creative officer of his own opinion. Crawford is a former tanker with the 4th Royal Tank Regiment who left the army in 1999, and has even written a book about it. I like Crawford. I've read his book. But unfortunately, he has become the latest victim to something I call HDDS, or herder drone syndrome.
Herder!
Herder
I
drone
love
syndrome
herder.
is the problem faced by professional military opinionists who have a surface level knowledge on drone warfare, but none of the actual deep understanding on how that warfare has rapidly developed over the past few years to understand how drones may affect things in a future war, or even how it's affecting things currently in Ukraine. Symptoms of HDDS include flashy clickbait titles that proclaim any new technology from tanks to jets.
Oh my god. Oh, this one is like, what was it, Elon said something like something along these lines, which I think we did the video on it. Lack equipment, mass drone attack. Nah.
Doomed because why spend billions of dollars on a weapon system
Cheap drones, sometimes costing just hundreds of dollars, have been used to destroy tanks in Ukraine worth millions. I mean,
if a $20 drone can take it out? It makes casual references to the ever-increasing
wait, hold on, what'd that say? Oh, I get the meme. Do you get the meme of why he said it? It's because he put the $sign afterwards.
if
I
a
get it.
$20 drone can take it out. It makes casual
That-
references to the
that's a good
ever-increasing
meme.
loss of Western tanks on the Ukrainian front, makes grandiose gestures that inflate the actual capability of small FPV drones, and surreptitiously, usually just by not knowing any better, parrot Russian propaganda that all Western
I'm sorry, the weight of of NATO tanks? Aren't Russian tanks notoriously fucking heavy, though? I mean, how heavy is the T-14? And they decided to, and that's the tank where they want to take the chassis, a main battle tank chassis, and have it made for, trying to remember back to Lazerpig's old video on it that he did years ago. They want to make IFVs and everything else out of a main battle tank chassis. It's like the, God, what is it? The BMPT or whatever, the Terminator, that War Thunder literally today as of recording they just added, where the very notorious video on it has the barrel shaking like a motherfucker.
Tanks are too big.
That's on a
and
T-72
too heavy.
video.
It ignores the actual
a T-72 chassis, I believe.
opinions of Ukrainian tank crews and fails to take into account that of the 95 Western tanks that have been lost on the Ukrainian front, very few of those were actually taken out by drones. And of that 95, 73 were highly outdated models that have either since been replaced or are in the process of being replaced. Out of those 73, 71 were models built before 1990, and 21 of those were tanks designed in the 1960s. The actual lesson here is that supplying Ukraine with outdated tanks, limited training, and none of the regular support elements typically enjoyed by other Western nations that are often seen as mandatory to keep those tanks in the fight has meant that their effectiveness has been limited. Ukraine's insight into how these tanks operate in battle conditions are of incredible value, but it does not strike a parallel with what would happen if Germany, Britain, Sweden, or America went to war with Russia. And keep in mind, even under the less than ideal conditions,
yeah, no, it's completely different. Like he just said, they don't have the logistics, the training, like all that kind of stuff that would keep them in top condition. They don't have. So of course it's going to be a separate, I forget, a separate talk. Sorry, I keep getting distracted. I realize how much I blink with these ears. They wiggle every time I blink, and it's really throwing me off.
Ukraine fights in, with a comedic list of tanks from various periods and in various states of repair at the time of recording. For every one Western tank they have lost, 43.7 Russian tanks have been destroyed. The second part of HDDS is completely overvaluing the capability and cost of the drones. There are a lot of drones on the Ukrainian front with a lot of different capabilities, none of which cost $20. The drones you buy in your local hobby store cannot simply be fitted with a bomb and driven into a tank. The $20 drones
no, it's
from
a big difference
that everyone points to have limited flight range, limited battery life, and most importantly, limited payload. You can't.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're definitely super fucking cheap in the grand scheme of things, but we're talking thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars comparative to like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. But they're not that cheap. They're not $20 cheap. They're cheap comparatively, I would say.
Throw a kilogram of explosive onto something that can barely lift its own battery weight. They can also be jammed quite easily, or traced and followed back to the operator without the operator even being aware that that's happening, due to the safety software that these things have due to government regulations. This was something the Ukrainians learned very, very quickly when they tried this tactic back in 2014, and then again in 2022, when the Russians either jammed those drones, took control of them, or sent one flying back towards the operator, or just showed up
that's
with
a scary situation.
Blew the fuck away. Drones need to be heavily modified before they can be used effectively on the battlefield.
God, and look how big that thing is.
Dropping grenades into the open hatches of vehicles are,
I've seen that video,
propaganda. Tanks don't sit around not moving on a battlefield with their hatches open.
No, if you look, that thing was abandoned, and they probably dropped it to make sure nothing was in there.
Unless they've already been disabled and or abandoned, or are not expecting to be in combat. The simplest of drones currently on the Ukrainian front cost in excess of $400 to make each, and that is with volunteers, 3D printers, and importing the cheapest made parts from Temu. And these factories don't run at a profit. They absorb the full cost through donations, not selling the drones.
That's still a lot cheaper than I was thinking.
Get away with in the kind of war Ukraine is fighting, but not something that can be easily replicated in a World War III situation. China might have some opinions if we start trying to buy drone parts from them if we went to war with, say for example, China. An entire industry would therefore need to be replicated, with drone factories producing their own parts, and that comes at significant cost. In the UK, a vast number of drone factories were set up in the hopes of cashing in on the drone military craze, and most of them have failed to expand beyond a single office, 3D printers, small teams of eager 20-somethings, and a dream. Simply because, well, first...
Homie, why the fuck?
3D printers, small teams of...
Bro, why the fuck are you going around on a fucking, what would you, I want to call it a Segway or Swagway, whatever the fuck they were called, hoverboard, in flip-flops, shorts, and a Hawaiian shirt?
eager 20-somethings and a dream.
Oh, you look 20? Motherfucker, you look 12. 14 at the most. What is this, bring your child to work day? I'd want to fucking push this dude over. Why is there just a fucking longboard here?
Simply because, well, firstly, the actual cost of setting up mass production is far greater than first anticipated, especially when one realizes that it's not just drone parts they need, but camera equipment, night vision, thermals, long-range battery packs, and radio equipment capable of resisting interference, triangulation, and interception, most of which is beyond the capability of these companies. Potentially, you could knock the price of production down quite significantly if you got all that set up and you ignore the cost of paying people who have to put it all together who are not going to work for free. Trust me, it's very tedious and monotonous work. And then the realization that in fact you're a company and at some point you're going to have to make a profit. All of this is
you
how
have
a
to make money.
$400 drone becomes a $10,000 drone. Even then, those $400 drones carry about enough munitions to kill a person or knock out light vehicles or generally unarmored targets. They did this to one of the trucks I was raising money for last year. That truck was fucked, but everyone inside walked away with their lives. Tanks
that's good.
Traditionally quite a bit more armored than a truck, and generally tend to survive hits a little bit better. I mentioned Ukrainian tank crews earlier. In some of these interviews, they have talked about how tanks generally survive multiple hits from drones because the Russians don't always have access to the heavier munitions required to take them out. I've
seen videos of tanks of not even American. I said American. Ukrainian tanks taking multiple shots from drones, or at least one, and continuing on.
Harder to produce and considerably more rare, allowing those tanks to race into drone hotspots, take out their target, and withdraw before those munitions arrive. A good example of one of those munitions is the famous Russian Lancet. In a full-time war economy, one of these costs around $20,000 to manufacture, or to put that in perspective, the cost of 5 artillery shells. This is of course assuming Russia is telling the truth when it gives these numbers up and aren't just calculating the cost of materials not including labor, setup, or the cost of the launcher. The thing about the Lancet is it's a drone in name only. It's technically a loitering munition which have been around for quite some time. Every country has been developing them for the past 10 years and some of those were given to Ukraine. China has even produced a tank which fires them.
Wait, that's a hell of a fucking screenshot. That's a hell of a... Fuck me.
China has even produced a tank which fires them, much to the delight of this article's author. This is not unusual.
Wait, China's new Type 100 main battle tank unveiled on September 3rd was a notable example of this. Crew protection, lightness, and high mobility with design widely considered to have responded to prevailing trends seen in the Ukrainian theater. Type 100 example even more so than the T-14. I've yet to see any actual footage of the T-14 in Ukraine, so yeah. Only footage I've seen of a T-14 is it breaking down is the propaganda shoots, like every nation has, and it breaking down during the parade or whatever.
Future developments of both the Leopard and the Challenger series will have loitering munition capability, and it was a prime feature of the KF-51 Panther. The Switchblade, currently in use by both the US and Ukrainian
Korean
Army,
one,
costs around $60,000 per unit, with the more dedicated anti-tank version costing somewhere in the region of $100,000.
Yeah, the Switchblade. Yeah, these things are fucking cool. Not only is it the name, but you launch that shit out of like a mortar tube.
Per unit. Hi, mid-production and quite drunk Lazerpig here. So I'm editing this next part out because I kind of went off on this bizarre long tangent about the technical differences between the Switchblade and the Lancet because for some reason we still live in a world where people who comment on the defense industry still do not understand that there might be a difference in quality between a $20,000 drone built cheaply out of off-the-shelf parts mostly imported from China and a $60,000 drone built by a company that used to build unmanned spy planes for the CIA back in the 1980s.
No! There's a difference? Imagine that! NASA Pathfinder project, an autonomous solar-powered aircraft that could fly without having to refuel, started life in the 80s as a CIA Black Ops project built to fly forever drone. Orver. Drone aircraft that could shoot down incoming nukes. It was canned by Bill Clinton and declassified in '93. I gotta see if I can find one on this. Hold up. Let me take a picture of this really quick. That sounds really fucking cool. Who knows? Maybe Laser will do a video on it. That synth coming in.
I need to remember that's the logic of people who know throwing a grenade at a tank won't work, but think if you attach that grenade to a drone, it magically becomes an anti-tank missile. And my fan base is a mite more intelligent than that.
Or at least you would hope so. Also, I'm kind of upset. I love it when people go off on tangents like that.
Or at least I like to think so. So outside of the technical specifications, what the Switchblade can do over the Lancet in terms of self-scouting, camera quality, stealthiness, general precision versus moving targets, is irrelevant in the current context of trying to prove that cheap drones have made tanks obsolete, which is presumably what this video was at one point about when I sat down to write it, and is now, well, it's this. What you need to know is the Switchblade can be carried by one soldier in a backpack, thrown on the ground, and then fired like a mortar within seconds. It's
I've seen videos of, I want to say, or video, I should say. I think I've seen a video of, I want to say maybe a Marine deploying one in like Afghanistan.
It's got infrared as standard. It can do a whole bunch of really clever things like guide other Switchblades onto targets or coordinate with other drones and have multiple Switchblades hit multiple different targets simultaneously, you know, to lower the chances of your enemy going, oh no, a drone, and then doing something really wild like taking cover. The Lancet does none of that. It's basically just a TV missile on a catapult. I mean, it's still an effective weapon, and we'll get onto that, but the reason Ukraine is able to get in with the tanks, do the job, and then get out before those things show up is because the Lancet is a very clumsy weapon. It requires a truck to move it around, it's quite large, it's quite heavy, it needs 2 people to set it up, and all of that takes time, and you are vulnerable that entire time you're doing it.
Yeah, that sounds, that's very time-consuming, yeah. Which would you prefer? A fucking mortar charge that you could just plop down out of your backpack, launch that shit and keep moving, or something that I need to have a buddy with? Yeah. I know which one I would go for.
To artillery, and you're just tempting the high Mars of fate. And there is some evidence that Ukrainian
high Mars of fate. I love that. That's a good quote.
Deliberately spooking the Russians by showing up with Western tanks in order to attract those weapons into an area that they're watching in order to kill the operators while they're trying to set these weapons up. To try and alleviate this, Russia has developed these good-to-go multi-launch systems. But again, that needs fixing onto a vehicle, and then you're just adding more complexity to the cost. And I think this, among many other things, is a good example of the constantly spiraling costs of running a weapons project like this. Any weapon system you develop, regardless of how cheaply, is going to be up against a constant war between offense and defense. Your cheap weapon is going to be super effective at first when no one is expecting it and have no ways to defend against it, that as they develop new systems or techniques or tactics against this cheap weapon, then that system is going to gradually become less effective over time and therefore must evolve to remain potent. The Lancet has gone through multiple versions, each time trying to increase its lethality or counter the defenses Ukraine has developed specifically against it, and I'll go on to some of those later. But needless to say, that means the Lancet, though it is estimated at costing roughly $20,000 to manufacture via various Russian reports, it was offered at export at $32,000 back when it was only seeing use in Syria, and now it's no longer offered for export, and that $20,000 number has never been updated as the weapon has grown in complexity. Hi. Slightly more sober mid production. Lazerpig here.
Damn it, I was about to say something.
Cost. I'm going to keep referring to the Lancet as a $20,000 drone because to change that, I'd have to re-record the entire video, and this is meant to be a short, quick video, and I'm not re-recording the whole fucking thing. But the reality
I don't blame
is,
you.
we don't know how much it actually costs. The only source for the Lancet's cost is a Reuters article, which is quoting what I think is the original export cost of about 3 million rubles, which is $37,000 at the time of recording based on current exchange rates. The only claim for it ever being $20,000 is the Wikipedia article, and that information was added on an account which has now been banned from Wikipedia.
Oh. Okay.
As far as I'm aware, it's just never been noticed and corrected. Meaning it has more than likely now matched the Switchblade in terms of cost. You see this again with those.
Either way, what I was about to say, yeah, if it's even if it was technically cheaper than the Switchblade at the time of when it first came out, with them adding more complexities, trying to get past whatever defenses Ukraine had, yeah, it's going to cost up in production costs.
Cheap $400 drones. A year ago, they cost $300 each. But every iteration, they need to fly faster, carry bigger payloads, be more durable. So this is kind of my whole
deal with more
the whole cheap drone argument. Arrows will still kill you, and they are much cheaper than bullets. But their effectiveness on the battlefield might be limited by certain other factors. Rant over, video continue.
Body armor, range, skill to use.
Even at the higher end of that, 100k is a far cry away from the millions it would cost to produce one tank. But the reality is we don't actually know how effective, or indeed ineffective, the Lancet has been against tanks. Statistics for the Lancet come primarily from the website lostarmor.info, a Russian website set up to discredit ArEx, which exclusively documents Ukrainian losses and has been accused of labeling Russian losses as Ukrainian ones. In fairness, this might not be the website owner's fault. They did start documenting Russian losses, but were slapped down by the Russian courts for doing so. And they do try to provide sources for each claim, but if you check for sources on its claim numbers, it simply directs you to an endless unorganized page of comments where random users submit footage gathered from Telegram channels, including Russian propaganda ones. Unlike ArEx, there is no verification or way to independently verify each claim outside of wading through hundreds of hours of.
Okay, I kind of feel bad for the website owner then. If he tried posting both, but they getting slapped down by the government, I kind of feel bad for him.
Allowing falsehoods to hide among the noise, made even harder by the sheer.
And then also the fact that there's no real source verification other than just comments like that, I'm not a big fan of,
Ukraine
though.
has deployed, and the almost impossibility to tell most of those decoys from the real thing.
Oh yeah, decoys are making a thing.
This is problematic.
Show
because,
again.
Well, Russia has been hyping up the premise of the Lancet to the extreme. In 2023, a Challenger 2 hit a mine and was abandoned and destroyed by its crew after persistent artillery fire forced them to abandon the recovery process. Russia insisted numerous times it was actually a Lancet that hit the tank, and according to the Ukrainians, the Russians fired numerous Lancets at the tank even after it was a burning hulk. Alright, I've just eaten a sandwich that had way too much cheese in it, so let's get this out of the way. Originally, they were
This is actually kind of cute. I kind of like this.
claiming it was the Cornet missile that took it out, which is far more believable until, you know, the Lancet starts to become the propaganda darling, and suddenly it's responsible.
Oh, I'm an idiot. I just realized it's like it's a fucking RPG warhead on 2 sticks. Wait. No, what? Oh, this is a funny fucking picture. I like this picture.
There's actually a small rumor. I'm going to address it here. This is the second Challenger 2 that gets taken out, which was apparently blown up by a Lancet, and this is what happened to it. But in the same area, a Lancet hits a T-64 and does this. See, the actual capability of the Lancet is really widely varied, and it's kind of led to this rumor that because there isn't really different variants with different payloads.
That didn't even look like it exploded. It looked like it just smacked it like a kinetic weapon.
That the Russians are flying around regular drones disguised as Lancets to make it look like the weapon is far more numerous than it actually is. But you know, that's just a rumor, you know. But while there's a picture of the
That'd be
challenge on the screen,
insane.
nothing upsets the VTuber more than pictures of British tanks. I've got no idea why. Let me put a random one on the screen. Boom, there we go. At the time of recording, 2 Challenger 2s have been lost. But Wikipedia claims, according to the Tanks of Ukraine Army page, that 4 have been lost. Now, normally, I wouldn't bring this up, but a lot of people keep messaging me to say
Have been visually confirmed as destroyed. So what are the other 2?
4 challengers have been lost. What do you think of that, Pip?
Well, first off, it's fucking Wikipedia. Like, generalized looking into shit, yeah, Wikipedia is a good enough spot to look, but for something like this, don't trust Wikipedia. I mean, as he showed on the fucking drone page, it said 20,000, and that was edited by a fucking account that is now banned from editing on Wikipedia.
This is the voice that I use for all the haters that message me on Discord and crap. That's what you sound like in my head, except more whiny. I just can't be bothered doing the full voice right now. I'm full of cheese. Anyway, this is the only source that I could find for that number. So, could you all just go ahead and just check the sources for that number, please? Just go ahead and look at them. Because 2 of them are the same footage reported on different webslop websites. And the third isn't even a picture of a Challenger 2. You do know
that's so bad.
This shit, right? I don't just believe you when you say this shit. But hey ho, apparently I'm the one that doesn't check their sources. I could just edit this myself and correct it, but Wikipedia editors get really, really uppity whenever a YouTuber wanders in, so I find it's easier just to whine about it in a video, because they'll fix it. They always do.
I don't blame you. I wouldn't want to deal with. I wouldn't want to deal with it. Wikipedia editors kind of almost seem like Reddit mods in a certain sense.
Supposed Lancet attack that took it out has
Don't
never
hate me
been
if that's
publicly released.
wrong.
This makes judging the actual effectiveness of the Lancet quite difficult and prone to very dramatic arguments. The likelihood is the Lancet is probably a fairly effective weapon, but likely not for the reason you think. When it comes to precision munitions, Russian troops have very few options readily available, and as a result,
I've seen that
the
video.
Lancet has been used in a variety of roles to fill the gaps, taking the place of artillery and counter-battery, as well as more traditional support elements, as combat losses sustained in Ukraine have...
Plain as that. That's... a yak? Maybe? Let me know down below what kind of plane this is.
severely diminished the Russian army's ability to...
So I don't think it's a MiG or a Su. I'm only seeing... It looks like it's a maybe thrust vector. I don't know. I don't know what this would be. So I'm trying to tell... I'm only seeing one engine, so I don't know what it'd be.
Support elements, in particular artillery and aircraft. In the later stages of 2022, in response to Ukraine's increased counter-battery effectiveness, the Russians began pulling hordes of towed artillery out of storage, some of which dated as far back as the Second World War.
Jesus.
With the limited ability to retain these units in service due to excessive barrel...
Well, to be fair... Oh, shit. Like, I saw this first, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's kind of bad, but whatever. That's bad. The fucking barrel is bent and squished. That's bad. But also, you have the... was it footage, I think, of Russian troops using Mosins, of all things?
Or move them around after they had been fired. Through the loss of transport vehicles, Russia's artillery dominance has finally begun to wane, and as a result, systems like the Lancet have been forced into this role. The irony here being that a $20,000 drone system is now doing the work.
He has a Putin patch. But I can't tell. Is his... It looks like his front plate is too low. It looks like it's sitting way too low on him. I thought the front plate is supposed to sit like up here.
The irony here being that a $20,000 drone system is now doing the work of an artillery
Looks like it's sitting too
shell, which the
low.
Russians
Maybe I'm
once
wrong,
bragged
though.
they could make for under $1,500. At no point has the author questioned that the reason drones are so numerous in Ukraine is that both sides are potentially lacking the equipment that would have traditionally performed that job and are falling back onto cheaply made drones to fill the gap. Or that perhaps it's other things that are being outdated. This, of course, all bleeds into HD.
Oh god.
Other things.
I saw the T14 Future Designs. Oh, this is the Paramount traditional 3-bit crew turret layout is outdated when autolitters and remote turrets are widely available. I mean, yeah, they're available, but they're not really used. I mean, the only two that I can really think of that actually use it is Russia and France. I honestly don't know if China does. I don't know anything about Chinese tanks. Likely to follow the T14.
That are being
Whatever.
outdated. This, of course, all bleeds into HDDS's third part. The third part of HDDS is, of course, quite simply forgetting all the work done into anti-drone technology over the past few years. For any argument about how drones have suddenly...
God, look how big that bitch is. Who remembers when, I only know about it from the Remy video when he played Contact, the Arma 3 DLC, but he showed a picture of the Bastille Day parade of the soldiers with the French soldiers who unveiled it.
Made everything obsolete. You have to firstly just ignore any developments into anti-drone warfare that have also taken place. You have to ignore that in spite of the existence of heavy drone-based munitions.
How light is it if he's just wiggling that bitch around like that? Holy shit. Why is it so... Wait, what? He's just manhandling that thing. Like, that shit...
Taking place.
Wait,
you
what?
have to ignore that in spite of the...
Yeah, he's like very much so manhandling it. Sorry, that really threw me off. Okay.
Of heavy drone-based munitions that can
Sorry,
take out tanks.
I'll
Ukraine
try to
still
I'll slow
uses
down
tanks
pausing from now on.
Quite a lot, and there are reasons for this, and I mentioned one of those reasons earlier. Lancets, regardless of how effective they actually are, can be countered quite easily. At their heart, they are basically just self-propelled TV missiles, and they are susceptible to the same jamming techniques used against drones. They can be intercepted by FPV drones quite easily, and Ukraine has developed a cottage industry of FPV drones specifically designed to take down Lancets. Where these drones are not available,
That's
Ukraine
cool. I
has
haven't
found
seen
the
those.
best solution to fight.
I've stayed away from a lot of war footage and stuff like that recently. In like the past, I think the last time I really looked into a lot of it was like 8-ish months ago, give or take, maybe a bit longer. So no, that was actually pretty cool. I've never actually seen any FPV drones taking out
Against
those kinds of
Lancets
drones. That's
and
pretty cool.
Shaheeds from bombing cities is an old World War II propeller plane with a machine gun on the back. Hi, me again.
Wait,
okay.
what?
Is an old World War II propeller plane with a machine gun on the back.
This is holy shit! You doing drive-bys in the World War II plane? What the fuck?
Back. Hi, me again. Okay, so it's not actually a World War II plane, it's a Yak-52. It's an old Soviet acrobatic plane built in Romania
Same difference to
during the
me.
1970s. But I mean, just look at the damn thing. I mean, come on! But they have found that the most effective
pretty cool.
defense is to simply put a big cage around the target. The so-called cope cages, which Russia threw up in a desperate defense
God,
against
cope
the
cage.
first wave of Ukrainian
I haven't
drone
heard that
attacks for
fucking. I haven't heard that fucking term in a while. Come on, War Thunder, add the cope
The
cages.
hilarity they have caused have proven to be quite effective. Russia was forced to introduce a newer, more updated version of the Lancet, which contained additional sensors and tandem warheads, but the cost of this new unit has never been publicly revealed, and its effectiveness remains mired in the questionable
Oh, I
logic
hate these
of
fucking soy
propaganda.
jacks.
However, what has been revealed is Ukraine has the ability to track these new units of Lancets quite easily. Because jamming equipment is now so prevalent, it requires forces on both sides operating drones to cycle through frequencies trying to find one that isn't jammed. I'll get onto that in a bit since it is quite important and another thing sufferers of HDDS are ignoring. In the first days Lancets were being used en masse, the
Oh shit,
Russians
I
would be
paused
forced
again,
to
didn't
stop
I?
jamming the frequency that the Lancet was being used in. The Ukrainians would simply cycle through frequencies, find the one that wasn't being jammed, and then jam it themselves, causing the Lancets to just fall out of the sky. In a response, the Russians
That
are
doesn't
now
seem very
forced to
smart.
turn off their jamming systems when firing a Lancet to prevent the Ukrainians from figuring out the frequency. This not only makes them exceedingly vulnerable to Ukrainian return fire, it also pre-warns the Ukrainians that Lancets are on the way when all Russian jamming equipment suddenly turns off. Equipment which does exist to prevent things like this, which every tech bro knows about and is probably screaming at the screen in defiance over, is expensive, and therefore not something you find on a $400 drone, or a weapon that's designed to be cheap like the Lancet or the
Oh, fuck. That's a shitty position to be in. Do I hope to God that they don't jam the frequency that my drone is on? That makes it crash, which kind of makes it useless. Or do I unjam my fucking frequency, hoping that they don't find the frequency I'm on? But in doing so, gives them a heads up that, hey, I got a fucking drone in the air.
Heat. Jammers are of course not as sophisticated as you might think. At the end of the day, they are just things that scream very loudly in a certain frequency, blocking that frequency from being used by anything else nearby. They require a lot of power and can typically only scream in one frequency, or at best a narrow band of similar frequencies, hence why so many of them have multiple aerials. Russia's cope sheds, for again all the hilarity their appearance may,
Oh. I've never seen these. What the fuck? Okay.
are covered in these jamming stations, allowing these mobile bunker things that Russia proudly calls the Beast to block drones at a
Oh my
wide
God.
radius.
It's like the fucking wannabe Russian mouses.
Over a long range of frequencies. The idea behind them that these so-called beasts move ahead of the assault, blocking drones for the advancing units behind. The effectiveness of this has been questionable. Now you might think the best defense against this is to simply have the drone change frequencies, and you'd be right, but changing frequencies isn't as easy as pressing a button or changing a dial. In fact, in many cases the aerial assembly has to be completely ripped off and replaced with one with a newer frequency, hence why a lot of drones, such as the ones I helped build with Richard, are shipped without an aerial, allowing the receiving unit to add their own as needed. This is another drawback of the cheap drone assembly, as modular frequency modules, or even the ability to change frequency
means
on the
more
fly
money
as needed. Sometimes the drone automatically picking one that is not actively being jammed is quite expensive, and another reason why things like the Switchblade are more expensive than the Lancet. But that's the old idiom. You get what you pay for. Putting soldiers' lives at risk.
I was about to say, it's quantity versus quality. That's what it comes down to. They don't have the money to make quality, so they have to deal with quantity.
With cheaper equipment that might not always work is the lesson the US military has learned the hard way. Ask any US veteran and they will happily bitch to you about any number of equipment problems based entirely on that
constantly.
topic, often for several hours without ever stopping for breath. It's quite impressive. The real counter to the jamming problem for both sides has been to simply not use frequencies at all. Large spools of fiber optic cabling is now attached to drones, which makes them immune to
so like
jamming
a tow.
systems, or the operating operator being so easily triangulated, with the added benefit that the latency is always perfect, allowing the operator to see in high definition without having to risk a higher latency connection. These drones have caused all kinds of hell for both sides, to the point where parts of the front lines are littered in webs of fiber optic.
Oh,
so far,
that's
Ukraine's best.
That's insane. Oh, a fucking spider web of fiber. God, that's a fucking whole horror story in one picture right there. Holy shit.
Against them has been barbed wire, sometimes attached to a motor, which causes it to spin, entangling the fiber optic cabling of those drones passing overhead and causing it to snap. However, the best defense against those drones simply remains a big cage. On the front lines of both sides, supply routes are now covered in large arc structures, a coop cage supreme, if you will, that prevent drones
I haven't seen this either.
Supply trucks, and both sides will typically spend days or often weeks trying to find holes or discreetly make holes in these nets, and then have several drones lie in wait across the road, ambushing any vehicles they find. This has led to Ukraine up-armoring everything from medevac to supply trucks in order to minimize the damage caused by these ambush drones. In much the same way, US and British forces in Iraq were forced to up-armor their patrol vehicles owing to the threat of IEDs. Of course, Ukraine constantly stating that you need to up-armor everything to make it harder for drones to take you out is of course ignored by sufferers of HDDS, because if they acknowledge that, then how does making tanks lighter, faster and less armored make any sense? But
it just doesn't
then. Push the Russian propaganda narrative that Western tanks are too big and too heavy, then this is a part of reality that you have to ignore. Of course, Ukraine's best counter to drones remains, and has surprisingly remained, old radar-guided anti-air systems from the Cold War. Because of the way they are designed, drones have a relatively high radar cross-section for their size. Modern-day stealth fighters, despite being hundreds of times bigger, actually have smaller radar cross-sections than modern-day drones, meaning they can be easily picked up by
up. Sorry, I'm pausing it again. How detectable an object is by radar. Blah, blah, blah. So, insect has a cross-section of 0.001 meters squared, 0.01 meters squared, 0.003. Smaller cross-section than a bird. Barely larger than an insect. Barely larger than an insect. Don't know, actually, so it could be anywhere from 0.75 to 0.05. Knowing the B2, it's probably on the lower end of this. And an F-16 of 4. Okay.
Cross-sections than modern-day drones, meaning they can be easily picked up by radar systems. Mobile anti-air systems like the HOARD have proven exceedingly effective at taking them down, meaning to avoid systems like this, drones have to fly low to the ground.
God, I just realized I haven't oh, damn. I've never actually seen a HOARD in real life, like any actual footage of it. That's cool.
Targets considerably harder, and when you're operating wild weasel attacks with drones, you have limited battery life to play with, and by the time you've gotten to a target area, you're more than likely to just take the first target of opportunity you see, as opposed to try and hunt for the bigger fish and risk your battery going flat, which means the guy standing out in the open gets the $400 drone to the face, but the tank camouflaged in the forest next to him gets a free pass. This is of course just on the Ukrainian front, where funds are limited and results are needed immediately. In countries not affected by this war, which includes every country in the world outside of Russia and Ukraine, funding and time for testing is in ample supply. Electronic warfare systems have proven quite effective against things like drone swarms, but EW systems are expensive and hard to explain, so let's skip all that and talk about lasers.
There are people who propose shooting drones out of the sky with a laser or with a missile. That's not really a good way to take out, let's say, 100 drones that are attacking you from all different directions.
Every country in the world now seems to be building lasers, and it's easy to see why. Lasers have been a thing for generations, but up until now, we've just never really had a use for them that wasn't more practical than the thing we were already doing. Now we do. For mere pennies a shot, a laser can hit a drone with, well, laser accuracy. And take it
But,
down, these systems are not as expensive to build as you might think and cost pennies per shot. Rumors are that some of these systems have seen testing in Ukraine, where these systems fit into our current doctrine.
I'm also pretty sure,
and where these
I'm also pretty sure that the US has fielded them for a while. You know, I'm pretty sure they have.
things are now technologically will
don't
be
quote me on that.
different in a few years' time. Ultimately, these weapons will need mounting onto something, and why can't that something be a tank? Laser tanks are finally here.
Oh,
the ultimate
yeah.
irony here is that a 2-penny laser is shooting down a $20,000 drone, which is doing the job of a $1,500 artillery shell. And this is being described by people who write for prestigious military news blogs as a cost-saving initiative because herder drone. This gets picked up by WebSlop and then posted to the website, subreddit, or Discord that you get your news from as a gotcha moment by people who have only read the title. But the nuance behind the emerging front of drone warfare might be a little bit more complicated than these idiots like to proclaim. But as history has shown, every technological advancement ever made, from handheld launchers to aircraft to missiles to smart bombs, has all been heralded by these same idiots as the death of the tank. Tanks, of course, are still here and have simply adapted to change.
Tanks are still here,
needed,
and honestly, I don't see them leaving anytime soon.
My catchphrase, it is not the biggest army that wins, it is the one that is the most adaptable to change. My name's Lazerpig. Get the fuck out of my house.
You got it, Pig. You got it, Laser. Ooh, Kyle, that's right. Kyle Hill did a new video. I'll have to check that out. Oh, that was Lazerpig. And yet again, homie does not disappoint with his videos. God. I love learning new shit. Make sure you guys check out his original video. It's linked below. Like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, you guys take care of yourselves. See ya.